This meeting is being recorded.
Yes, it is. All right. Good morning. Thank you for being here for this is our third episode for season 2 of Career Ed Talks. My name is Kelly Thawley, and I am a career specialist in the school district of Lee County. I'm in the career and tech ed department. And we'll go around and introduce some of my teammates and also our panelists for today and our discussion on Communication 101. So I'm going to throw it over to Brandy, if you want to introduce yourself first.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Brandy Fulgham. I'm also a career specialist in career and technical education with the school district of Lee County. I work right alongside with Kelly Thawley, and I help oversee career exploration, K through 12, and on-the-job training for high schools. And I will pass it on to Nicole Bailey.
My name is Nicole Bailey. I'm a teacher on assignment in the career and tech ed department, and I oversee some of our marketing, culinary, education, and IT clusters.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. I see that we have some of our amazing career specialists on here. So thank you to all of our career specialists that are located at the high school. I know we have definitely one classroom. So hello to the Avid freshman class from Island Coast. If we have any other students, feel free to give yourself a shout out, and thanks for joining us. If not, this is being recorded, so this will go up on our YouTube channel, and I'll share about that in just a moment. Before we get started with our panelists, though, I do want to make sure that I show you guys all this. So this is our flyer for Career Ed Talks. This is something that we started last year in the Career and Tech Ed department. This was in response to there needing to be some sort of way for students and teachers to learn maybe a little bit more about career education and technical education. Season 1, we focused on all of the 17 different career clusters, and we interviewed local professionals within each of those clusters, and you can find that on our YouTube channel. Season 2, we've kind of switched gears a little bit because in Southwest Florida, through local workforce development surveys, businesses here listed employability skills, which are sometimes known as soft skills or foundational skills, as one of the top gaps in target career areas. So because of that, this was our answer to that, and our CTE department is hoping to highlight professionals in local career industries, but also showing how they have gained knowledge and strength with specific employability skills to hopefully impart some of that knowledge to our students before they are preparing to go into the workforce. So that is our flyer. As you could see, we have already done professionalism and ethics, etiquette and attire. Today is communication. And then for the rest of the season, March, April, and May, the very first Wednesday, 9 to 10 a.m., we'll be covering those additional topics. So thank you so much this morning to all of our panelists. They will be helping us talk about communication and teaching you some skills in communication and some tips and tricks to remember when you're going out into the workforce. So we will go ahead and get started with our presenters. First off, I'll say your name, where you're from, and your title. And then if you just want to give us, let's go with the first question. You can just tell us what and where you studied to kind of give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll go into some more questions. So first up, just because he is with the school district, we're going to go with Dr. Adam Molloy. He is the coordinator for community engagement. So thanks for joining us, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, and thanks for having me on. So a little bit of background. I studied history at the University of Florida. And had my temporary teaching certificate, and then taught for 14 years at North Fort Myers High School, kind of all things social studies history. I got my master's in history and wrote my thesis on the integration of the school system here. And then got my doctorate just recently from FGCU in educational leadership, really measuring kind of student demographic patterns and student assignment plans. But that's kind of my background in terms of studying or studies and what I studied. That's about it, Kelly.
Thank you, Adam. Next, I would like to introduce Miss Christleen Knaub. She is with Conric PR Marketing, and she is their Director of Marketing. So welcome, Christleen.
Thank you, Kelly. Very excited to be here. I am a Cape Coral local, and I went to school over at FGCU and studied communication. So really excited to talk about communication skills today.
Thank you. Next up, we have Miss Nicole Nunez, and she is with Jason's Deli. She is the local sales and marketing manager for our region.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole Nunez. I'm originally from Orlando, and I came down here to study resort and hospitality management at Florida Gulf Coast University. My background's more in hotels, but just recently, for the past 5 years, I've worked for Jason's Deli doing sales, marketing, and catering.
Thank you. We're happy to have you. Next is Mr. Mike Haley. He is with M Multimedia. And Mike is owner, founder. What's your official title, Mike?
I have no clue. I'm not a title guy. I do a lot of things, but my path was a little less traditional there. Before I could go to college, I did a program here back in the early 90s called AmeriCorps, which was a great program where I got to learn a lot about the community and get a stipend to go up to University of Cincinnati for a couple of years, where I studied audio video production back when it wasn't digital. So literally everything I learned within the first year was antiquated and not that useful. But after switching back down here, moving back down here, I finished at Florida State with a degree in interdisciplinary sciences.
Well, thank you for being here today. And I think it's important for our students to hear kind of those non-traditional pathways as well. So we're happy to have you. And lastly, but not least, is Mr. Paul Gorney. He is currently retired, but previously with Murphy Business and Financial Services, and he is a senior business intermediary. So we're happy to have you, Paul.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And I graduated high school in Newark, New Jersey, and then came down to Florida to the University of Miami, where I got a degree in business and finance. And part of that was my formal education, but all along the way throughout high school and college, a lot of education through working part-time jobs for different businesses and companies.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you as well. Before we kick off the rest of the questions, I do want to say happy CTE month. It is officially February, and it is Career and Technical Education Month across the nation. So it's time to just really appreciate what all of the local school districts do to help the local workforce and focusing on career and technical education to help prepare our students for whatever tomorrow's workforce looks like. So happy CTE month. In Fort Myers, the mayor proclaimed it CTE month on the meeting that was 2 days ago. So that was really cool. It was neat to be in that. So we're excited to celebrate and happy to be part of career and technical education. So let's move ahead with the first question. What made you choose your career? So this is always an interesting story. So on top of focusing on communication and ways to communicate and those employability skills, I know students also love to hear your background story. And I think that that's important too, for them to hear that not everybody has to follow this A, B, C, D pathway, and that you can explore different options. And that's kind of what high school and college is for, is exploring those different options. So we'd love to hear what made you choose your career field. So let's start with Christleen.
All right. What made me choose my career path? Well, I would say, if I asked myself what I thought I was going to be when I grew up in high school, it would not be what I'm doing currently. And I feel like that's probably a commonality between a lot of us. I think I knew I wanted to do something with people. So when I started college, I knew I wanted to major in communication, knowing that that was a nice broad major, and communication is an important skill no matter what you're doing. If you're a doctor, if you're in TV, if you are working at a law office, you're always communicating with people. So I studied in political communication. Really wanted to write speeches for politicians and elected officials, and tried to get a few internships there and failed. And I think that was probably a blessing, because that kind of pushed me into my nonprofit world that I worked in before I started working in marketing. And, you know, through that, using my communication skills to help fundraise, help get out the mission, to help support our community. And then ultimately moved me into this marketing role where now I'm able to help other businesses and organizations really get their communications out there. So I think that's been my common theme throughout all of my my roles in my lifetime.
Thank you. Let's switch over to Nicole.
So my background, I've always realized that I like talking to people and working with people. My first job was being a bagger at Publix, and I just really enjoyed talking to the people. And so when I was trying to decide on what career I wanted, I found the Resort and Hospitality Management program at FGCU, and I was like, well, let me try it out. And I fell in love with it. Through my internships, again, I had no idea what outlet of hospitality, because customer service and hospitality, that's another key skill that you will bring into any career, is you know, having to work with people, so, and meeting their needs. So I took a lot of internships throughout my time at FGCU in different fields to feel out where I wanted to land up, and also to build my resume. I thought that would be important for me. So I did everything from events to food and beverage to hotels, recreation, housekeeping, just to feel it out. And that's, you know, I think that's really important when you're in, you know, college and in high school, is to test things out. You're at that time where you can do that. And so I was, you know, going through that channel, and right out of college, I got a job with a hotel, and I did that for about 5 years, and they rotated me through a lot of different departments. And after a while, I found Jason's Deli, and you know, realizing I can use those skills I learned in hotels and through my job, or I'm sorry, through my degree, where I brought them into Jason's Deli, where I'm constantly meeting people and talking to people, and that's something that I enjoy.
Thank you. What a great example of finding what you're good at and also finding what you enjoy, and then making a career pathway out of those two things. Let's go to Paul. Why did you choose your career? What made you get into your career field?
I've always had a love for business. Having worked, as I indicated earlier, a lot of part-time jobs, I always saw how business people who own companies have more control over their future. People who had their own businesses could kind of direct their own path. So along the way, obviously, you have to start off with working for other people. So, you know, I did that all through high school and college. And then when I got out of college, I was very fortunate, had a job lined up right away, and started off being director of credit collections for a large public company in South Florida, and moved from there to one of my careers for Merrill Lynch, where they spent a lot of time and energy and money on training me, both in sales and marketing, and that was an outstanding opportunity along the way. You know, being the oldest of the whole group here, my resume is a little bit longer, and I've kind of done different things along the way. But from there, actually went into the restaurant industry as director of marketing for a restaurant company in the Midwest. Worked for them for a number of years, and came back to Florida, was recruited by a company, a public company here in Florida, who I became director of marketing for their restaurants. They owned 5 restaurants here in Florida. From that, moved on to, of all things, was recruited through a headhunter for a different industry totally, and that was construction industry, landscape construction, landscape maintenance, and got recruited by that company. Ended up being partners for a private company, being made partner in that company. When I left that company, I was bought out by the owner and started my own business. So that was my final hurrah, where I finally got to do what I always wanted to do. So I built a very large private or a pest control and property maintenance company in the Tampa Bay area, and built that up to be one of the largest in the marketplace. Sold that in 1999, and then went on to become a business intermediary, which is basically a business broker. And I work with, during the last 20 plus years, have worked with business owners who've owned businesses and helping them sell their companies, presenting their companies, analyzing their companies, and allowing them to have an exit strategy to move out of something they've built up throughout their whole life into retirement. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, but I've always loved business, always loved communicating with business owners, and enjoyed it each step of the way.
Awesome. Thank you. What a great experience too, to be able to communicate with all of those different businesses and learn so many different things, I'm sure. Let's go to Adam. What made you choose your career?
So I think I was always kind of enamored with the power of the classroom and the ability of certain teachers. One I have on the call here, but my mom was also was a pretty powerful teacher, and her ability to communicate both on the personal character disposition side, but then the subject matter side. And those two were kind of organically connected, but it was really communication from the teacher to the student about how much they cared about their development. Even critique, if communicated properly, could really jumpstart some level of a student achievement or excelling. And I think I was enamored with that power. I think I found it fascinating, how certain teachers could communicate things in a way. Like, I'm not a great math or science guy, but with certain teachers, that communication and that skill was so valuable for me to really develop. And so I think after college, after realizing that I couldn't just stay in college, I had to get a job. I was like, well, I wanted to give the classroom a shot. And, history sometimes has kind of like a concrete, etched in stone type of approach, like where it's rote memorization. And I thought if I could communicate history in a way that made it alive and fire and challenging and edgy, that kids could really connect with that. What I ended up finding out is that the most rewarding part about communicating in education was really the relationships that you built with the students, and being able to connect to them and see what their interests are and where their journey is, and to try to help them not just build up a timeline of events, but to build up a critical thinking approach to life. And I think that really just fueled, my development and wanting to be a better communicator. I mean, there was times in the classroom often where my lesson, I did not properly communicate, and we didn't get to, where we needed to go. And that failure in communication, it definitely honed in.
Oh, you muted.
Sorry about that. I muted myself. I felt like I was really at a good point in my conversation too, until I muted myself. But I wanted to say that where I'm currently at with the district is definitely a growth of the classroom. Now I'm communicating very important strategic initiatives and programs out to the community, and developing those relationships very similar to the ones that I had in the classroom, but on a much larger scale, about what the school district is doing. So if the cost of and the risk of failure is much greater, but I like that challenge, because that really puts you at work at what exactly you're communicating, how you're communicating it, and what your audiences are. So, from projects like the half-penny sales tax, or a new student assignment plan, or even something as simple as like peanut butter now in the cafeteria, understanding those different communication points, but really the power of the classroom, the ability to connect, and how complex those connections are based on our own dispositions, I think is what really drew me into education, and then now in this current role.
Right. Thank you for that. Definitely. I think that relationships have to lie at the foundation of any sort of communication. You have to have a relationship set up with whoever, whatever group, whatever person you're trying to communicate with, and you'll be more successful. Let's go over to Mike. Mike, you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into your career field?
Yeah, so mine was kind of out of boredom, to be honest with you. I'd worked about 15 years at Field Edge, one of the local software developers here, in sales and marketing. And it got to the point where if I had to do one more of the same webinar presentations over and over again, I wasn't sure how I was going to carry on. And so in the midst of that, I had a mentor that had a small little video studio with an audio booth in Cape Coral. And he said, hey, I know you like to make music. Can you, if you want, you can use my studio. So I started writing 4 songs. And in the middle of that, he got picked off. My mentor got picked off by some startups out in some people that worked at Facebook. So he moved out to Silicon Valley. And I tell people that's the best thing that happened to me, because I learned to fish on my own. And at that time, I really wanted to continue making my own music. And I said, you know what? I got a good, decent living selling software. I got a little bit of cash. Looked at the guy that was helping me make my music. I said, we can just kind of take over Tom's business, recreate it as M Multimedia. And ever since then, we've kind of really dove in and you know, became one of the leading video production companies in the area. I like to think we're still up and coming, got a long ways to go. But I think the point of mine is there really wasn't a specific career choice I was making. It was, if I could tell, you know, students anything, is just be present in the moment and understand the opportunities that are before you. Because you know, in high school and trying to figure out college, I wasn't expected to go to college. I was expected to go climb up phone poles like my dad and do labor. I was going to go work for Ohio Bell. I was the first male in my family to graduate high school, let alone college. And so, you know, in that sense, I really became enamored in the creative side of things. I finally was able to get something that was feeding my creative juices, and I fell in love with it. And at that point, I still sold software about 5-6 years while I ran M&M, and I got a nice big contract with Sony that helped me build this new studio. And then when Field Edge got bought out the 3rd time and they changed all my compensation structure, it made it very easy for me to make the leap finally that my wife was pushing me to do for about 3 years prior to. So I guess I would say is, you know, be present and, you know, understand the opportunities. And if you're not sure exactly what you want to do right now, you know, there'll be opportunities that you start, just get involved in as many things you want, and you'll find what kind of sticks.
Great advice. Thank you for that. So today we are really focusing on communication. So for all of our panelists, this is a chance for you to share, you know, what you wish you could have learned in high school. We always have these conversations about the real life skills that students maybe don't always get an opportunity to learn during the school day. So that's where this comes in, and this is a chance just to share some of that knowledge and expertise with our students. Communication is more than just verbal. There's also nonverbal, there's written communication, and that all encompasses the idea of communication. And it doesn't matter what career field you're going into, you're going to need these communication skills to be successful. Communication at its bare, the definition I found was imparting or exchanging of information or news. In a social aspect, that can be sharing ideas and feelings. So just thinking about that word communication, kind of share what you think that means to you and what that means in the business world. Why is it important? And maybe even a couple of good tips for verbal and written communication for our students. So I'm going to throw this to Paul first, just to kind of share some information about communication and maybe a couple of tips that you can give to our students.
One of the things that I think we all forget in communication, and I've read something on this recently, that between 70 to 90% of communication is nonverbal. And we forget that the way we present something, our inflection of our voice, the cadence of our voice, especially now with so much being done online and by video and by phone communication, is really, really important to make people feel confident in us, in what we are saying to them, is got to come across. Back to the old world where I grew up, also, you know, the way you present yourself. When you have meetings face to face, you know, how do you dress for those occasions? How do you look for those occasions? You know, do you maintain eye contact with the person you're talking to? Do you give them affirmation when they're speaking to you? I think there's a lot of things we, you know, young people sometimes forget. You know, in meetings, make sure you shut your cell phone off. Make sure you're not distracted by other outside things that, you know, somebody may be walking by. Don't be looking at them. Be looking at the person you're talking to. That kind of communication is something that I think is sometimes not really emphasized as importantly as it is, because the person on the other end of the table, the person you're trying to sell something to, or the person you're trying to sell yourself to get that job, is looking at every aspect of what you're doing. From, again, the way you're dressed, the way you're looking at them, the way you're presenting yourself, and being prepared for those kind of discussions in every aspect as to the questions you're going to ask them and the responses you're going to give to them when they ask you certain questions.
Very good advice. Let's jump to Christleen.
Oh, thank you. And Paul, very good. I love that because so much of communication is evolving. I think, you know, we think back to 3 years ago, I never really saw myself talking to a computer all day, but that's now the world we live in. So, you know, active listening is so important in a virtual setting, also in person, but practicing that. And I think the big thing is, you know, you can learn something, but practicing it is what's going to make perfect, and being aware of how it's changing. So as it evolves, make sure your communication style is evolving. You know, there's always the question of when you're making eye contact, are you looking at the person on the computer? Are you looking dead center in the camera? You know, nodding along, making sure they understand that they're feeling heard. I think that's always very important, more so than the actual speaking part of communication. I think when I was in school, most of the things you learn are about communication as you know, you're just talking at somebody, but it's really more than that. So the best thing to do for me was to go out in the real world and talk about what you're passionate about. Find people that are passionate about the same things, have those conversations, and don't be afraid to give feedback, as well as, you know, be able to take it and make those changes, because that's really where growth happens in communication. So being open to that always. And again, it's evolving. So what's working for you right now in a high school setting is not necessarily what's going to serve you in a college setting or in a business setting. So being able to understand and adapt to your audience is always key as well. And whenever you're going into a presentation or a job interview, do the research before. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice for an interview is come with questions. An interview is just as much you interviewing an employer as much as it is them interviewing you. So being able to say, oh, I see your company has won X awards, you know, tell me a little bit more about that. People love to talk about themselves. So giving somebody an opportunity to do that, you know, is going to show, wow, they really did their homework. They know their stuff. So, you know, always do that research ahead of time. Always be willing to evolve.
Very good advice. And I love that you said to practice, and sometimes that requires being uncomfortable. I think when you're uncomfortable, that's where the most growth comes from. So if you're not comfortable with speaking in front of people or making a presentation, maybe put yourself in a situation where you have to do that, because that's where the growth will come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I get very nervous talking like in a recorded setting. It always stresses me out. And people are like, oh, wow, it seems so natural for you. You seem great at it. But I'm going to tell you, you get nervous, and that's okay. It's okay to be nervous, and it's okay to let people know that, because it kind of, you know, breaks that a little bit up so you can have a more honest conversation.
Yeah, it comes back to making those relationships. People want to know that you're a real person and you're human too. Yeah, thank you, Christleen. Let's jump over to Adam.
Yeah, and kind of connecting with what you just said, Kelly. building off what Christleen was saying is that, you know, seeking out those challenging communication opportunities. If you have a difficult conversation that has to be had, or if you have a maybe a challenging school presentation, I would seek out those opportunities. What I noticed with students that really challenged themselves and were uncomfortable with communicating and listening, the more that they put themselves in an opportunity to do that, the stronger they became as a person. Back a little bit to the fidelity of a connection, and I think that, you know, Paul mentioned it with the nonverbal, but a lot of times in communication, people are just waiting for their turn to talk instead of really just being ready to listen and understand. Maybe a negative side of my job is dealing with a lot of upset community members for whatever reason. And I found the best way to connect with them is to really try to listen and understand and not really respond, but really to try to understand them. And that level of communicating in a very sincere way and trying to understand, I think that just makes it a lot more authentic. It goes to what you suggested too about researching. Like if you're going into any sort of conversation, do as much research as you can. I call it like a side +1 type of deal. I made it like a goal in grad school. Whatever the professor was talking about, I would do a side research +1 and try to bring up something that either challenged or was somewhat oppositional or was in disagreement to whatever the readings were. And it just made the connection, I think, a lot more authentic. It showed that you cared about the topic and that you were willing to understand it, not just be given it, that you were willing to work with it and transform it a little bit. I would say, and I know that this is going to make me sound like really old, but with textile communication, there is appropriate usages of that. I would try to stay away from text with really serious and difficult conversations. In my life, just on the personal side, I've felt a lot stronger talking one-on-one and really connecting with the person than just sending it. I know it's a lot easier to just communicate that way and just say, hey, we're done, or hey, we're not going to do this, or I don't want to do this. It's very easy on the text side. I think it's a lot more authentic in with fidelity if done one-on-one. And I think people can really understand you. You mentioned, Kelly, and just not to go too long on the written communication side, writing is so powerful. So some of the things that I get to do as part of the team here is I get to write a lot, whether it's a holiday letter or a welcome letter or a comment on this. And I think really refining your writing skills, the power of the written word and the ability to interpret from that is great. So, I mean, it's not just the ability to present, it's not just the ability to listen, but that ability to write, I think, is really strong too.
Very good points. Thank you. And thanks for bringing in the written aspect as well, because especially now, I think that written communication is so widely utilized, whether it's through email or texting, like you said. So it is something that's needed. So students, if you wonder why you have to take that English class, that's why. Let's jump over to Nicole. Can you share some tips about communication, what it means to you, how it interacts with your day-to-day work?
Sure. Everyone brings up some great points. The listening is a really, that was actually my point I was going to bring up. Listening is a very important skill. It's something that we're not taught. So it's something you got to learn. And one of the tips that works for me to listen to customers is just hold back, wait for them to finish, especially if someone is complaining. Sometimes they just want to be heard. They don't want your opinion. They don't want you to fix it. They just want to be heard. And sometimes with them just talking, they figure out what needs to be done, and then you can act on that. And being empathetic, that's something that's also a learned skill. Just listening to somebody and feeling, what they are feeling is really important. And that's also very nonverbal. Going on the written side of communication, in today's world, Zoom is very popular. And it is nerve-wracking to get on here, but it's what's our world is right now, is doing these Zoom meetings. I never thought I would be taking appointments via Zoom 3 years ago, but now it's a natural thing. And just getting comfortable with some of the uncomfortable things is, a skill that is learned and you have to adapt to. And with today's world, I think in any business, in any field, you just got to be fluid and adapt to what you're being faced with. What I'm just going to touch base on what Adam said, the texting, serious conversation shouldn't be done by text or by email. Those need to be in person. Or by Zoom if that's the option. But, I've had a lot of people that, will send in resignations by text. Like, that's just not professional. You have to still follow those business etiquette that is formal and it's still running strong no matter what age we're in and what the times are. You still have to write your letters, your emails have to be professional, capitalizing names and using greetings and endings. Those are all really important to use, especially in the emails. You can't use it as a dialogue like a text. You still have to follow that formal format, and employers look for that. How professional are you with your writing and how you're speaking?
Thank you. I love that you talked about adaptability and flexibility, but you also talked on being empathetic, and that plays into some emotional intelligence. And I think that a lot of times these are skills that play into communication that maybe don't come to the forefront of our mind, but yeah, those are skills that you have to learn. Being able to adapt to different situations. For teachers, 2.5 years ago, we had to completely switch from teaching in the classroom to teaching via Zoom. And you couldn't use the excuse, well, I don't know how to use that, or I don't want to use that. You had to learn. So even teachers that had been in the career for 20, 30 years had to learn something new. So you have to be willing and open to learning new things, being adaptable and flexible. And then I really love that you talked about the emotional intelligence, because at the end of the day, there's still a human aspect, especially to communication. You have to make those relationships, and you have to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, even if it's not a situation that you personally have ever experienced. But stop and think, what would it be like to be in that situation? And then being able to use some of that empathy and emotional intelligence. I heard a podcast this morning that said, they've learned their greatest form of communication is by asking, what do you need? Or what can be done to break down whatever the problem is? What do you need us to do? So not finding solutions for people, but working with people and using the communication skills and asking, kind of like what Adam was saying, what he has to do. He has to go out in the community and ask. And listen. So being able to ask, what do you need? And truly listen. It's not always about jumping in and trying to solve the problem right away. So great points. Mike, let's jump over to you.
Well, that's kind of a good segue, because I was thinking too, like, one of the things I try to teach people is not to react in your communication. And I'm talking more in conflict situations where your knee-jerk reaction. I'm not competitive personally, but when it comes to business, and I wouldn't even say competitive, but like, if a client's not happy, if a client has a complaint of some sort, it's and I feel we're not, it's hard for me sometimes not to get defensive, right? And be able to have that emotional intelligence, not to be defensive, not to take it personal, and know the right channel and the right time to communicate. So one of the things they kid around here is if they see me walking around the building, they know I got an email that I have to think about. And so I said, hey, I'm going on a lap. It's really just me trying to step away from that channel that's so readily available, and getting in a better mindset before I communicate to that. And that kind of leads into that, what I would say that our generation really didn't have to worry about as much was what I would dub the time capsule communication. Everything these kids communicate now, and I teach this to my nephews, is online. And even if they think it's gone, it's not gone. And so, as you guys are maturing and starting to enter into young adulthood and looking for jobs and things like that, just keep that in mind that, those are things, just stuff that you communicated 5 years, even though if you're not the same person you were 5 years ago, we all hopefully grow from that, can still be perceived as, it's out there, right? And like I said, the other thing I think that I've learned just through being in sales all my life is how to actively listen, but read between the lines too, and be able to pull out, almost be able to interpret what they're saying if they're not saying it directly. So being an active listener, sometimes, I'll get an email or something like that, and one person in the building will take that as a certain tone where I'm not taking it as that tone. So, understanding the tone, that can be really difficult too nowadays, with text messaging, online communication, email communication. And that's why I think verbal sometimes has to be at that point where there's confusion or any uncertainty, it's time to get on the phone or a Zoom at that point.
Thank you for all of that. Does anyone have anything else to add to that? Any of our panelists, anything to respond to?
I actually, if I can jump in real quick, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about Mike was saying, because that was beautiful. I think when someone brings up a conflict, what I try to do is make them feel heard and understood. So what I'm hearing you say is, and being able to package, like, here's the problem I'm identifying. That gives you both an opportunity to say, is this really the issue? And then you can kind of talk through it a little bit more. And it's perfectly okay not to have an answer or a solution. I much rather have somebody tell me, you know what, Christleen, I don't have the answer for you. I don't have the solution for you, but let me take some time, talk with my team members, and let's find a solution. I think a lot of people try to be a know-it-all and just want to, oh yeah, and BS their way to a solution. That can lead to more conflict. So it's okay to say, I don't know, but I hear what you're saying. Let me find out.
Yeah, it is. It's okay to say, I don't know. I think a lot of times now students think they have to have an answer, and you don't, whether it's a personal conflict or something professionally. You can say, I need time. Next question. We are about 15 minutes away from closing it out, so we'll just kind of keep that in mind. What did you learn in high school that prepared you for what you're doing now? So what is something that maybe our high school students are learning now that they will look back and say, oh, I actually did use that and I didn't think that I would? So let's start with Nicole.
All right. So the one thing that I learned in high school, I was given an opportunity to be a captain of our color guard team within our band. And I learned a lot of skills while just being captain. Not only were you having to make routines and checking in on your teammates, but I was also their cheerleader. I had to bring them up and check in on them. How are they doing? And making sure that they were happy and were ready to go for every game. And be their mentor. If they were struggling in an area, I was there to pick them up and work with them, after school on certain routines. So, I carry that into my field of management and hotels, and even right now in sales and marketing. I might be the only person in sales and marketing right now in Jason's Deli, but I do work with every single deli and meeting their needs and checking in on them. I was like, hey, where do you want to focus? Where are you trying to build sales for your deli? Okay, let's try to focus on this. I'm going to need your help. Let's do this together. So, I really learned the skill of teamwork and the foundation of just being, a mentor and a manager through just being, a captain.
Good points. And I love that you brought up a mentor, because that's something that has been in every single one of our career ed talks. Finding a mentor and having someone to be completely open and honest with you and to provide helpful feedback is so important throughout life and throughout your professional career. Paul, what's something that you learned in high school that has helped prepare you for professional business world?
I think foremost was analytical thinking, to be able to analyze the situation and understand what I was getting into before I got into it. I had a lot of opportunities in high school to do presentations. That gave me a lot of confidence in front of a classroom setting. Was also had the opportunity to lead assemblies in high school in front of hundreds of students, being up on stage in front of a microphone. That gave me confidence. Though all those things I was scared to death to do, nervous as can be. That's normal. If you're not nervous, if you're not a little frightened, there's something wrong with you. You've got to be able to just step off into these situations that are a little bit uneasy for you in order to hone new skills, to become more successful. Each time you do it, you get a little less nervous. You get a little more confident. But initially you're afraid, and that's normal. But high school students, take advantage of those opportunities to throw yourself out there into an uncomfortable situation, to take leadership in a situation. And that'll develop your personality and your characteristics that much better in the future as to what you're going to be doing in the future.
Thank you. I'm going to go over to Christleen and kind of same idea. I'm going to change your question just a little bit though. More so on going back and sharing something with your teenage self that you wish you would have learned back in high school or middle school. So what's something that you wish you would have learned that you know now that helps you with communication?
I definitely think don't be so afraid of how people are going to think about you. I think a lot of times in high school, you get wrapped up in that and put yourself in those uncomfortable situations like we were just talking about. Make the most of it. Like for me in high school, I really developed most of my communication skills outside of the classroom in clubs and extracurricular. So like band, I was in drama with Dr. Molloy's mom. She was a rock star. And even though she wasn't my English teacher, I feel like I learned the most from my drama teacher on, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to fail. And I've translated that to my life. When you're applying for jobs and you're applying for opportunities, a lot of times it can be intimidating and you think, oh, there's somebody who's more qualified for this, or, oh, I don't have every bullet point checked off. I don't have this experience. I don't have this. I would say definitely, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to try out for something that you don't feel qualified for, because you might surprise yourself. And likewise, look at those skills and, how can you try to practice those outside of the classroom or in the classroom? What clubs could you get involved with to, hone in on developing those skills? So don't be afraid to try all of those things. Worst case scenario, it's just a funny story in your adult life when you're presenting to classrooms, 20 something years later.
Very good points. Mike, what's something that you wish you could go back and teach your high school self, teenage self?
I'd have to do it all over again. But I think, at that stage of my life, quite frankly, full transparency, the social aspects of high school, athletics were really my primary focus. It shouldn't have been my primary focus, but were my primary focus. I think one of the things is I wish I would have listened to older people and wiser people and teachers and coaches a little better. I had a tendency to think I knew everything at that stage. I don't know if that's how teenagers are today, but I'm assuming there's a few still out there. So I would say, being open to, different generations' opinions and things like that. And then I guess the other thing is knowing that, I sought attention and there's different ways to get that, and seeking avenues where there's more positive attention. And that's something I learned through high school, where I started by the end of high school, started getting on the dean's list and getting things like that. Whereas that wasn't happening my eighth grade freshman year as much. And so once I got a taste of, oh, wait, there's a different way to get attention and there's a positive way of doing that. That was probably my biggest takeaway or lesson learned.
What a strong lesson to learn too, as a teenager. Thanks for sharing that. Adam, if you could go back to your teenage self, what would you share?
Yeah, I would get out of the high school tunnel vision is very hard. So it kind of connects with what Mike was saying, is that you got this zeroed in focus on, in mine, I couldn't even see past the day, so I had to, I wish I could tell myself, hey, listen, go knock on this door and talk to this person. You'll learn a lot. At the high school level and throughout your life, there's all these different little wise little Buddha experts on their own things. And all you have to do is go and ask and say, hey, I'm kind of struggling in this area. So it's not just office hours at the college level, which I wish I would have told my college self that my B pluses would have been A's had I gone to office hours. But just being open to have a conversation to say, hey, listen, it's not just me, like in some crazy little video where it's just you rolling through life. There's all of these other people that have all of these other experiences and wisdoms. I wish I would have knocked on the door a little bit more in high school, to my teachers, and asked them about their experiences and their thoughts about my development, and been open to that. You got it. I had great parenting and I heard it from them, but even that becomes siloed. And so if you could just I wish I could just said, hey, break down the walls, go talk to people, listen to them. I think I would have been better off for it.
Yeah. And that goes back to having a mentor. So finding someone who's already been through what you're going through and asking for wisdom and experience and support. I want to make sure that we give a couple of minutes to any of our students or classes that might be on. Does anyone in the audience have any questions for our panelists? Feel free to just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. No? Okay. Well, then we will start to wrap this up. I'm going to go around to each of you one more time and just feel free to give any final thoughts on communication and any tips or tricks that might help our students. So let's start with Mike.
I got a lawnmower in the background, so it's probably a hard time to communicate, but understanding your environment when it's time to communicate. Yeah, that's a good one. But no, I think, again, it is not to be redundant, but just the act of listening and, again, trying to develop the skills to really read between the lines and understand what they're saying. I'm inherently a problem solver, so it's very hard for me. I had to teach myself to shut my mouth and not try to solve every problem, because that's just what I do. And so that's probably the biggest thing that's gotten me to the point where it's once I learned, if I actively listen, especially in a sales role or a marketing role, it really has helped me kind of, get to where I am today.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us today. Christleen, any last bits of knowledge?
Yeah, I would say definitely, going back to the mentors, surround yourself with people you admire, skills that you admire. We learn the most from the people we interact with and communicate with. So definitely surround yourself with those people. And then my other advice that I would give is don't put so much pressure on yourself to find the right job the minute you graduate, because every adult is still trying to figure out what they want to do when they grow up. So that's the secret. So don't be afraid to try a bunch of new things. It's like the Goldilocks approach until you find what's just right for you.
Yes, exactly. We're still trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up too. So that's the secret, students. We don't have it figured out. Nicole.
Just like they said, listening is very, very important. If you have to bite your tongue and just listen, and then just make sure that whatever they're saying, you communicate it back to them. Did I hear that you are unhappy with this, or this is what the problem is? And don't be afraid to, if you don't have an answer, that's okay. You can always come back to them and follow up, because, they rather you know that you are taking them into consideration than just, giving them a white lie. per se. So definitely ask for help, go back to your colleagues, go back to your mentors, and see how you can break down that situation and make it right.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us today, Nicole.
My pleasure.
Paul, last little tidbits.
I think being prepared for every situation, as far as a lot of the students, that one of the most critical things they're going to be doing moving forward is maybe their first job interview. Yes, you may do different things in your life. However, when you're on that job interview, that person needs to feel that that job is the thing you want more than anything in life, that this is the most important thing at this moment. I mean, in your inner mind, you can be saying, hey, I may be doing this only for a while or for a season, but you need to communicate, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do. And then, as everyone else has said, listening, being able to listen and then process what you've heard and turn around and present the right questions to follow up with is very, very critical.
Thanks for being with us today, Paul. I love that you said being present is kind of going along with, if you're interviewing for a job, that's what you're going for. And so that plays in with being present. So be in the moment, enjoy the place that you're in right now, find the blessings, find the silver lining, and know that it's not the end. There's still more to come, but being present in that moment. So thank you, Paul. Last but not least, Adam, final bits of knowledge to impart.
Yeah, I think it's going to sound a little odd, but having some communication with yourself. So like when everything goes dark, when the screens go dark, when everything cuts out, when the lights go out, who are you? And ask yourself, what do you want? What do you really like? Having that communication with yourself is not always easy. Who am I? I think it'll make you a lot stronger when you're going out there into the community, or just, when you're going out in the job search, because you know what you stand for. But that's an organic process. And that's something that has to happen pretty regularly. So I know it sounds weird, but just having those difficult questions when the screens go dark, when you're not texting, when you're not out with your friends, because a lot of that stuff is surface level. But find out, ask yourself, what do I want? What do I want to do? And that sort of thing. So it'll become stronger and stronger.
Yeah, great advice. Doing some self-reflection and asking yourself those same questions and really listening to your answers. And that can kind of guide you to whatever your next step is. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you. I think this was a great career ed talk. So thank you for sharing. I do want to very quickly show you all our YouTube site. So if you ever decide that you want to check out some of our previous episodes, you can search for Lee County CTE. It's Lee County Career and Technical Education. If you go to playlist, you can see season 1, and that has everything on there. I believe it has, well,
good morning. Thank you, Stu.
All right, sorry about that. There's 16 episodes on there. And then for the new one, you can see where season 2 is. So far, we'll have 3 episodes uploaded. We have 3 more episodes coming the rest of this year. So stay tuned on March 2nd, April 6th, and May 4th from 9 to 10 in the morning. That's the first Wednesday of every month. We're going to be going over some more employability skills, including working in teams and diversity and inclusion, self-management and confidence in the workplace. And then we'll finish out with resumes and interviews for our final career ed talk in May. So I hope that all of our teachers and students will tune back in next time. Thank you to our panelists. If you ever want to come back on again, you're more than welcome. The last little bit that I want to jump in and make sure that I plug for College and Career Week is coming up in March. This is the first time across the district that we're celebrating College and Career Week. So that will be March 7th through the 11th. And for our panelists, on the 11th, on that Friday, we would really love to have some of our high schoolers out in the community doing some job shadowing. So if you are interested in hosting and having a high school student follow you around, maybe someone who is interested in marketing or communications, or kind of your career field, what you're doing, feel free to reach out to me and I can get you hooked up. So thank you all for being here. And I see we've got some comments that are saying thank you and thanks for sharing. So thank you so much to our panelists again, to our teachers and students for taking an hour to be with us this morning. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you.
Have a happy Wednesday.